Hello, I'm Kelly McCullen. Joining me on the set are two candidates for the North Carolina Court of Appeals. Phil Berger Jr. is challenging incumbent Linda Stevens. Thank you so much for being on for this discussion. We flipped a coin backstage, and by virtue of that coin flip, Mr. Berger, you get the first question. It is biographical in nature. What qualities do you bring to this race? What are your qualifications if the voters choose to hire you to be a Court of Appeals judge?
Yeah, well, first of all, Kelly, thank you for having us today. It's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and I look forward to having a good conversation with you and Judge Stevens about the race. So in terms of qualifications, like many of your viewers, my wife and I grew up in small towns here in North Carolina. My wife's a public school teacher. We've got two great kids, and we've worked hard to instill those small town values in our children. And that sort of everyday work with my kids and their classmates, and hearing the stories about what goes on in classrooms across this state, gives me a unique perspective on what's needed for a judge on the Court of Appeals. In addition to that, I was in private practice for about 7 years in a small town, was district attorney in Rockingham County for 8 years, protecting the people of Rockingham County, and now I serve as an administrative law judge. In each of those capacities, perhaps more so as a father, decision making is important. The people put a great deal of trust in me when they elected me district attorney, and the people here in Raleigh put a great deal of trust in me to make decisions as an administrative law judge. And those are decisions that I've made every day for the last 10, 15 years. Those decisions impact people's lives, and I think that's one of the things that some individuals perhaps forget, that behind every court case there are parties who are impacted, whether it's economically, socially, or perhaps even with their freedom. There are people who are impacted every day by decisions that are made. As district attorney, I made decisions on about 23,000 cases per year for 8 years. So I've got a history of making tough decisions on behalf of the people of this state. As an administrative law judge, I've made about 100 decisions a year that directly impact our businesses, our schools, and people who are in contact with government and government agencies every day. So it's that sort of perspective on decision making and a healthy dose of it that I think makes me qualified for the Court of Appeals.
Linda Stevens, what have you brought to the Court of Appeals? What will you bring to the Court of Appeals if reelected?
Well, again, I thank you as well, Kelly, and all of the organizers of this event for this opportunity to have the conversation and to educate the people who will be making this decision for this seat on the Court of Appeals. Much like Phil, I credit and value my background and the way I was raised with giving me the proper perspective to do the work that I do now. So I'd like to talk about it just a little bit. I too grew up in a very small town, very small. I had the very good fortune of being raised by my grandparents. Some people might not consider it good fortune until they hear the whole story, but my grandmother never went to school a day in her life, could not read or write. My pop dropped out of school in the 3rd grade to go to work in the cotton mills, because you could do that then as a child to help support his family. But he taught himself to read well enough so that he could read his Bible, which he read every day, and read our weekly newspaper. But despite the fact that those were my influences, and we were very, very poor, my grandparents understood that for me, education was key. And so they stressed to me, not in the words that I'm using, of course, they were functionally illiterate, but they stressed to me the value of getting an education and working hard. And they raised me to believe that if I stayed in school and I worked hard, I could dream big and I could do anything that I wanted to do, but it would be up to me and not up to anybody else. They couldn't help me with my homework, but they could encourage me and push me and make me be driven to stay in school and do well. And I did that. I became the first person in my family to graduate from high school, valedictorian. I went to college on a full academic scholarship. I came to North Carolina and put myself through law school. I've worked hard all of my life to do whatever the job that I'm in at the time requires in order to get it right and to do it well. So out of law school, interestingly, at least I think it's interesting, my first job was as a law clerk on the court where I now serve as a judge. And I learned more in that 1 year of being a clerk on the Court of Appeals than I learned in all 3 years in law school. And I'm careful not to say that in front of some of my former professors, but it's a true fact. You just learn so much doing this work. And then I had the opportunity to go to the North Carolina Industrial Commission and serve as a deputy commissioner there for 4 years. And in that job, I heard people's stories across the state of North Carolina about what had happened to them in their jobs and what had caused the injury that they were complaining of. And I got to learn and experience both sides of the story, which my grandparents had always also instilled in me, to listen and to evaluate both sides of every situation that I was faced with. And then I had the good fortune to be hired by a law firm in Raleigh as its first female associate, and within 5 years, its first female partner, and I practiced there for 22 years, again representing parties across the state of North Carolina. I was so fortunate to have a practice that enabled me to represent individuals and companies and municipalities and governmental entities across the state of North Carolina. So I got to know the state very well, I got to know its citizens very well, and then I had the opportunity to do what I'm doing now when I was appointed to the court in 2006. So I've been there for 10 and a half years. It's not a job that you learn overnight. It takes a lot of hard work, but I think my background indicates that that's what I've been doing all my life. I like to work hard. We have a heavy caseload and a rapid pace at the Court of Appeals, and that fits right in with my lifestyle and my desires for the way that I do my work. So I've been there doing this work. I have a record that the voters can check, and I think that it will convince them to re-elect me.
So, two rural backgrounds, steeped, the values of rural North Carolina to both of you. But you said,
just to correct, I'm from rural South Carolina,
rural
but
South
just
Carolina.
over the line. And been
There's
here
not
since
that much
74.
difference in North Carolina and South
True.
Carolina folks that I've ever found, all good people. But Mr. Berger, you brought up something in your opening remarks. You said you've got the link with the kids in the classroom. You hear what's going on in the world, I guess, in the small town. And you go, that tells me what's missing on the Court of Appeals. You said something along those lines. When you looked at running for the bench, for this seat, what did you see that you could bring that's not there? Candidate aside, there's something, is it a vibe, is it a culture, is it a decision-making ability? What was it that you were mentioning then?
Well, Kelly, I think you hit the nail on the head with culture. There is, I had a conversation recently, and a gentleman said, judges provide continuity for our culture. He's right. We need judges who understand our traditions, respect the rule of law, and are consistent in their decision making. One of the things that I've done as district attorney and as a judge on the as a judge in the Office of Administrative Hearings is I volunteered my time as a youth football coach, as a baseball coach at the high school, because I think it's important to give back. It is the perception among many that once you get into certain offices, like the Court of Appeals or Supreme Court or others, that you sit in an ivory tower, that you are untouchable by the public and you're beyond what the public can see. I think that's wrong. If you talk to lawyers across this state, they'll tell you they don't know all the judges on the Court of Appeals. That's something that needs to change. If you talk to members in a Chamber of Commerce who are struggling to get their business off the ground, they want to know who's making decisions on their behalf in the judicial system. Because to many, what they see on television is a broken judicial system. And if they see someone in a coach's shirt or a golf shirt at a Chamber of Commerce golf outing, that tells them that there are people on the court that are approachable, that it's not an ivory tower situation like some would want it to be, that this is an elected position that needs to serve the public.
Mr. Berger brings up, Ms. Stevens, to follow up. Maybe the judges need to be higher profile. People don't know who you are, or the court in general. They don't know who to vote for. What do you say to that? What is the appropriate role in the Court of Appeals? What is the appropriate visibility, if you will, of a judge who sits on that panel?
Well, I'm involved in a number of civic endeavors myself. I serve on a number of boards of nonprofits. I'm a member of some community associations and some NAACP groups. So I'm out in the public as well, despite the fact that, as I said earlier, our job is very demanding because of the caseload. But what I try to do as a Court of Appeals judge every day is to honor the oath of office that I took when I was sworn in February of 2006. And that oath is to uphold the Constitution of our country, to uphold the Constitution of our state, and to follow the laws of our state, so long as those laws are consistent with our constitutions. That is what I strive to do every day, is to apply the law to the facts of each individual case that is brought before me, after first studying that case and making sure I understand what it's about. And then I let the law lead me to the result that the law requires. Sometimes I don't agree with that result, but that is a level playing field for everybody. I believe that the work of a Court of Appeals judge requires that we follow the law and that the law favors no one, regardless of station in life, regardless of any attribute, regardless of position or the ability to hire an expensive lawyer, regardless of beliefs. I'm not allowed to let my beliefs get in the way of honoring the oath that I took when I became a Court of Appeals judge.
The opinions that any judge has or any judicial candidate has for any particular issue, and we've got some red hot ones in this state, it's okay now to be partisan and it's okay to have an opinion. How does that work when you're campaigning for groups that want you to take a stand against your assertion that I'm a judge and I need to give everybody a fair shot independent of what I really think about this issue that's come across my desk?
And it's interesting that you would preface the question with, it's okay to be partisan and it's okay to take a stand.
It's legal, I should say.
It's allowed.
It's allowed.
It's allowed. I do not believe it's okay.
Okay.
I understand that it's allowed, but I think that judges need to inspire confidence in the people that they serve, to believe that they really will not permit a personal or political agenda to influence the way that they rule in any particular case. So I think that if judges are willing to do what's allowed rather than being restrained and keeping their personal and political and partisan opinions to themselves, then they give the public one of two potential beliefs. One is that the judge may be willing to rule in accordance with personal or political beliefs rather than the rule of law. Or, alternatively, that even though the judge won't do that, because honestly, if you don't follow the rule of law, we're the Court of Appeals. We're not the last word on the law in North Carolina. You're going to get reversed if you don't follow the law. But to try to convince the citizens of the state that judges serve that the judge should be supported and perhaps earn those citizens' votes because of giving the impression that the judge will rule a certain way in accordance with the particular individuals or groups of individuals' belief systems and desires for what they want a judge to believe. So I have chosen from the time that I became a judge and have been engaged in this process not to share my beliefs. I don't believe in the partisan election of judges. I think that we should be independent and an independent voice for all citizens. That's what I strive to do.
Back to you, Mr. Berger, on that point. You say high profile is okay. You say letting people know what you think might be okay. I may be putting words in your mouth, but what is it that you could change on the Court of Appeals other than people need to know who you are if you're a judge, and they need to be better in tune with the decisions being made by that court? How do you balance it out? And how do you see partisanship on the court, since this discussion obviously went in that direction?
Well, let's talk about two things with that. First of all, how do you make the Court of Appeals, or any appellate court for that matter, more high profile, and is that a good thing? I think it is a good thing because there is a lacking in our society of an understanding of what takes place in the courts. There are many who see on the news and in the media that certain court opinions or rulings go a certain way, and they believe it's a popularity contest or a political contest because judges, in the view of the public, are making decisions based on partisan beliefs as opposed to what the law is. You saw Ruth Bader Ginsburg not too long ago make some partisan comments, and that sort of thing just cast doubt in people's minds. So I think the more we can expose people to what goes on in the court system, the better off that's going to be. And how do we do that? One thing we can do is we can open up the Court of Appeals to webcast. We can create a website. If you go to the Court of Appeals website now, it is one of the most archaic websites that you could possibly find, and trying to discern any information from that is nearly impossible. We need to modernize our technology in the court system just on a basic public interface level. And if we can do that and we can give the public the opportunity to understand what takes place on a day-to-day basis, I think that helps not only the judges become more high profile and more visible, but it also helps the public understand. Now, with regard to partisanship and labels, for years there was on the Court of Appeals and the North Carolina Supreme Court and even Superior Court and District Court, this election on a nonpartisan level. And one thing, you go across the state, you go in your hometown and you ask people who the judges are, who's running for judge, and nobody knows. And not only do they not know who the judicial candidates are, they don't know what they stand for. At least by having partisan labels, at least by labeling me as a Republican and my opponent as a Democrat, you understand, at least on a base level, some idea of what we believe. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? When we bring jurors into the courtroom every day, when we instruct them on what to do to follow the law, we ask them to use their everyday experience and common sense when they're making decisions. We ask them, can they follow the law even if they disagree with it? Now, these are people who go to work every day. They're not in the courtroom every day. But those jurors take an oath to do that, and they agree to follow the law. The idea that somehow labeling a judge as a Republican or a Democrat would take that ability away from a judge is simply nonsense. We need more information to the public, not less.
Take a half minute, as we're running out of time. Sum up your campaign for North Carolina Court of Appeals, and then we'll give Ms. Stevens the last word.
Well, Kelly, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think it's important. If you didn't think high-profile judicial races was important, you wouldn't have us here, right? So there's some element of being out in the public that's necessary for judges. And if you want a judge who is fair and consistent, if you want a judge who's a conservative, if you want a judge who understands that the Constitution is not a living document, it's a legal text, then I would appreciate your vote. My name is Phil Berger. I'm a candidate for the North Carolina Court of Appeals. Thank you.
Linda Stevens, the last word by virtue of you winning that coin flip. Sum us up in this conversation.
And thank you, Kelly. And I absolutely agree with Phil that voters need more information about the judges. I am all for that, and there are ways to get it that have nothing to do with making the races partisan and restoring politics to the selection of judges. So I would like to say to you and all of your viewers who are going to use this opportunity to be informed that I do believe I am a fair and impartial judge, and I believe I have objective evidence to support that. I would like for your viewers to know that last summer, the lawyers who defend lawsuits, the ones that sit on that side of the courtroom and take the position against the lawsuit that has been filed, honored me with their highest award. I'm the first woman to receive that award. And this summer, the organization of lawyers that bring those lawsuits and sit on the opposite side of the courtroom and prosecute the lawsuits honored me with their Outstanding Appellate Judge Award. Now, those are the groups of lawyers that go at each other in the courtroom. They have each selected me as the top appellate court judge in North Carolina in consecutive years, and I'm the only person to have been so recognized. So I hope that that says to you and your viewers that I'm not only a judge that says I am fair and impartial and I want to be fair and impartial. Those who evaluate judges have said that I am.
The ballot will read Linda Stevens and Phil Berger Jr. Voters, the choice is yours. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation this evening.
Thank you,
Thank
Kelly.
you, Kelly.